of just my most recent change, I moved down to Fredonia, Arizona, which is 3 miles south of the Utah border.
Wow.
So it's about 6 miles from Kanab, Utah, if you've ever heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Really fun place. I took this picture last night. I'm holding a little piece of wood out there. So really fun change. Could have only come about from COVID because I can work from home and be in a small town and just thoroughly enjoy it. So just by way of introduction, name's Norm Warren. Worked at Microsoft and then Ancestry.com and a few other companies like ASEA, Excel, Best Friends Animal Society, and that's where I found my love of Southern Utah. I just started at TrainUL and I'm the 90th employee. So small software company. They help you build a playbook for your business. And that is me. I guess on the side, I am kind of a real estate hack. I still own some properties in Utah County, and then I do some construction on the side. So I built out a basement. Sometimes I come up and stay in Utah County. I started out documenting BI solutions at Microsoft, Excel, Power Pivot, Performance Point. And then when I went over to Ancestry.com, I became a data analyst, learned Tableau. Power BI wasn't out yet. But since then, I've kind of moved into a data engineering role. And databases I've touched are Postgres, SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, some NoSQL databases. And then ETL tools like SSIS, Pentaho, SnapLogic, which is an online, and then Matillion. And when I worked at ASEA in American Fork, I was tasked with searching for an ETL/ELT tool used for primarily just to figure out our modern data stack. We just adopted Snowflake. And so I tried the Matillion as a UI tool and a couple of others. And then I stumbled across Dbt. And that's what brings me here. And this was about 6 months ago. And I pushed Dbt a lot. And typically, I used to pride myself at being somewhat product agnostic, even when it came to ETL or ELT tools. Until I stumbled across Dbt, it just kind of surprised me with some features and the simplicity of things that used to be quite a bit more difficult using some of the other tools, at least more cumbersome for me. And it brings me to asking a few questions. I know somebody mentioned this, but I'm curious, and you can speak up because I don't want this to be a, one person thing. But how many of you have heard of DBT or data build tools? And yeah, I'm curious.
I'll just throw in a little plug for Norm. While I was at ASEA, extremely new analyst, Norm taught me how to use DBT, and it was really easy and a really good tool.
Oh, thanks. Actually, yeah, I remember that. Zach actually contributed to quite a bit to a DBT project. That was very cool. Well, cool. I see some hands. The other question I have is, I am curious if I'm the only one, but after a while, how many of you have become somewhat product agnostic or even database agnostic, where after a while they they all seem similar but different? Okay. One other snafu. I joined Trainual last week. I just drove back from Phoenix, Arizona, Monday evening, and I could not get my tool set up on a Mac. I've been used to working on the laptop that they give me. In my last few companies, it's been a PC. And this company, I got a Mac, and so there's a lot of newness. I didn't set up my BigQuery, and I am so sorry. I apologize that I do not have a demo. And I usually like to have more demo than presentation, and to make up for that, I invite you to email me, and I will set up a part 2 of this so that I can demo really within the next week DBT on a Mac using BigQuery. The other thing is, when I used DBT over at ASEA, I was also using Snowflake, and so BigQuery is a new thing for me. And so this presentation is an introduction to data build tools without BigQuery. And so I'm going to put my email out there again. And do please email me, because I want to have a part 2 on this. Pat has agreed to see if I can present in June, but if you want something sooner, I absolutely can give you the grand tour. And let's see. And so let's go from there. What is DBT? Minus demo and some resources, just some fantastic resources. Let me introduce DBT this way a little bit with an architectural diagram. ELT is extract, load, and transform. And what was nice, I introduced Fivetran at ASEA. And in minutes, you can connect to, and this is with their built-in connectors, and they have quite a number of them, but in minutes, you can connect to data sources like Google Analytics, Facebook, Google Ads. We replicate our data from a Postgres database, which was once hosted by Heroku. Braintree, I wonder if I added Braintree, but that's a payment processor. So just in minutes, automating source data into your instance of BigQuery or Redshift or Snowflake, and all of it's done for you. I know in Snowflake it performs a merge operation, and so it's more of an upsert, but there's quite a bit of integrity as well in loading your raw databases. And so what does that do for us? Well, it allows us to spend our time transforming data and less time managing, extracting source data, except with the exception of the fact that, some of these tools, and I can speak mostly for Fivetran, they don't have all of the connectors that you would want. And so they offer a method for you to code in either Python or JavaScript, and maybe one other language, or maybe two now. But you can connect to an API, bring that data in, and as long as you form it in a way that Fivetran is expecting it, it will do the rest. But at that point, you're saying, well, I can create a merge statement in Snowflake, and I don't know what the equivalent is yet in BigQuery. But if I want to, I can load the data myself and save some money, because some of these tools do end up costing a little bit. There are a couple out there that are up and coming because it's a place to make money. There's one that's open source. I forgot the name of it. But eventually they're going to want to charge money. And so if you have to write your own custom connector, and if you're working in the cloud, it looks like, and at this company, I was using Azure. And so we built an Azure function. It'd be the equivalent to building a Lambda function in AWS. And then exposing that and letting Fivetran call the function, and then retrieve the data and load it. So that's the exception to what I call the easy button for extracting and loading data. But then you need to transform it. And that is what DBT is. DBT is the T in ELT. At this point, I just want to stop and ask if anybody has any questions.
Test. Mic is working now?
Yep, it is.
Yes.
Awesome. Hey, Alec here. I just have a quick question. It appears to me that a few of these tools, they require to take your, they're trying to take your data out of your environment. So for example, originally when Snowflake was introduced, it will take your data out of the VPC and manage it internally. Is that a big concern to a lot of people? Is that a concern to you, Norm?
Taking data from external sources.
Right, in terms of privacy, like originally when Snowflake
Are you
came
talking about security?
Security, yes, and then they would store it in a custom format, and it's not clear how you can get the data if you decide to sever a relationship with that vendor.
Okay, so your data is coming in a custom format. When you say custom format, could you?
So say you want to use Snowflake, and you feed your data to Snowflake. Usually we keep our data like in S3 in our VPC, in our AWS account. With Snowflake originally, they would take it out of your AWS account and manage it in their account, and they would store it in their internal custom format, like not org, not Parquet, not JSON, not something that you can use tools to query, right? So vendor lock-in and taking data out of our environment was a big concern for us. And so I'm curious if this is a common concern or this is something specific to us.
Okay, and maybe I can clarify. So data is not coming out of your data warehouse or your internal environment. The only thing Fivetran will do is bring data that is outside of your environment into your Snowflake data warehouse. Now, when I introduced Fivetran, we already had small groups of departments that were importing data externally, downloading it via Excel, just to be able to do their jobs. Like, for example, Braintree is a payment processor. Our accounting team was currently manually downloading whatever Braintree could offer in the way of Excel, so that they could perform some of that accounting checkup. So the E and the L is just data ingestion. It's not taking data out of the internal environment. But on the security side, companies like Fivetran are SOX compliant, and they do quite a bit to make sure that the data, even that the data that's coming in, is secure. And we had a pretty thorough review from our security team to make sure that Fivetran would be legitimate, and that
But they do store data
built.
in their environment. For example, Stitch, right? When it does
They
its
do.
ETL, they pull your data out, they do something with it, that ETL, and then give it back to you in the transformed format. Is that
As far as I know, Fivetran puts it in S3 first, and then does a merge statement from S3 into our Snowflake environment.
okay? So
yeah.
it's not a concern that the Snowflake, for example, takes data out of your environment, manages it itself.
Not after reviewing their security and what they do to secure our data, and then there was something in the contract that helped guarantee some things in case anything happened. But that's not to say this is a solution for all companies. Some companies may, continue ingesting external data in other ways. Maybe have somebody fly out with a thumb drive and then fly back. I don't know. But I'm not saying this is for every company, because now our company, when I was working for ASEA, we had to be compliant across the globe. And so it wasn't just SOX, but it was also GDPR, I think it's called. I hope that helps. And once again, I'm not, every company's got, every company is going to handle security differently. And I'm sure there's a continuum for your needs.
Sure, yeah, it does help. I just wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. It's a good question. The other thing is when you're handling, there is a feature in Snowflake that I've used in masking data as well. And so once you do get data in that's sensitive, there are ways to mask the data, even if you want to mask the data to internal users, which can often be helpful for certain things. So once again, DBT is the T, or transformation, in this acronym ELT. I hope that helps a little bit describe what DBT is. Here's another picture. And then this is what I put together for ASEA. When I came to ASEA, they were still developing what they should do with their modern data stack. And when I say modern data stack, I think I'm referring more to kind of a cloud environment. Using more a columnar store database like Snowflake. And you can see my little easy button right there. Okay, so DBT, once again, it's an acronym for Data Build Tool. It's a command line tool that enables data analysts and engineers to transform data in their warehouses more effectively. And I guess when you think of an ETL tool or ELT tool, what are some of the features that you are looking for? I'm just going to throw this question out there.
Easy transformations.
Yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes I think a lot of the functionality, there's a lot of overlap in functionality between tools. I think we had a little bit of a conversation in chat and everything else. So sometimes for me, it gets down to what type of, a lot of the non-functional, how performant, how maintainable are the artifacts and the things that I create, how, we talked about security, but scalability and all those sorts of factors. Because I remember in the day, whatever, 10 years ago or so, when I used to write single pipelines, then ETL jobs, and just the headache of managing it. And where we are today with the company I do, we have a data platform, and it is so liberating to just go in there and be like, okay, make that an incremental load instead of a full load, and just behind the scenes it all happens. Now that's not what this tool does, but just like programming languages, it feels like we want to go from first level, second level, third level, fourth level, and we just keep adding layers of abstraction to go faster and to do more with them.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, some things have changed since, big data has come up. And so I'm just reading the comments, sorry. So things have changed. I've seen them change when big data came up. There's kind of parallel where the machines or the software that we used improved. But also there was an open source initiative to handle the 3 V's that came up, where traditional systems could not handle the volume or the velocity or the variety of data. And so we also saw, I guess, more of a, now we need engineers. And there was a moment where, all of us were installing Hadoop to, when it first came out, to see if we could, get the systems all running to handle the bigger data. Now we have cloud companies that host things that make life a whole lot easier, like Confluent will host Kafka for real-time data ingestion and so forth. And so, and honestly, what I saw too is that the ELT tools to do the transforming, after, and that the ETL tools did not change a lot, but we started developing more of an engineering mindset with DevOps and DataOps, and so when I saw DBT, I noticed it was built by the same people that that have worked through this kind of transformation towards a modern data stack. And so let me just see what, okay. So these are the top DBT features or ELT features that I loved. One is that you can, DBT is open source. There's a core package that you download via the command line, and so when I started DBT project, I created a project in GitHub. At the time it was DevOps, Azure DevOps, which is really GitHub underneath. But I would start by creating a package and then cloning that, and then opening up in VS Code. And the thing about having an ELT tool that works with a version control tool is that a few things. One is that your SQL, your code is much more easy to get to. It's easier to change. So applies all those great engineering principles like dry, etc, easy to change. You can make it more reusable if your code is more available or it's easier to get to. So all you have to do is clone a repo and your code is all right there in VS Code. And the fact that there's version control. Anytime you have something break, the first thing that you do is find out what changed. And so it's very, very easy in GitHub and Bitbucket to see what has changed in your code and then to roll back or to troubleshoot from there. It's much, much easier to move between your dev, QA, and prod environments. And DBT makes it easier. The other things I saw is that you can embed testing in your SQL. There's just a little tiny bit of code and you can see if there are duplicates every time you run DBT against a source table. There are pre and post hooks. I love that feature because before and after you run a DBT model, you can, in a post hook, you can, create indexes on your tables or add permissions. There's a hash key, very simple hash key generation. I'm sure the Dbt-Snowflake version I was using utilized some of the features that Snowflake offers, but it keeps it all in one code base. Dbt Now Interacts with Databricks. I haven't tried that out yet. There's a data freshness check. And then there's a data lineage tool. So when you publish your DBT to its HTML version of documentation, you can see and click on any one of the nodes and see the lines go from source to your final destination and all of those nodes in between, stage and so forth. The other thing that really caught me by surprise is DBT has this very unique feature that introduces the equivalent to a slowly changing dimension type 2. And it utilizes Snowflake, and I'm sure the same with BigQuery, where it takes a snapshot of the table, and so in the tables that you say, I want to track changes in this column or these columns or these or anything in this whole table, it clones that table. So you keep the original data, but then you have an additional table. Storage is a lot less expensive, but you have an additional table that then tracks those changes. And then lastly, not lastly, because there's so many other features, and one of which is extending SQL with something called I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Jinja. And using Jinja, you can actually create macros where if you are going to, oh, thanks, Fitz. He says, that's all right, Jinja. If you're going to reuse a query, you can pass in some parameters and just call that macro. It's like having a SQL macro, where, for example, if you are masking data, you can call the mask my data macro, but you need to build it. And then seeding data is just On occasion, we need to create data and we want to upload just a CSV file with some statuses or something. And it's very, very easy to do that. All you need is the CSV file and you put it into a C data folder. And it really stinks because I wanted to show this tonight. And I'm very sad that I couldn't. The presentation gods are real. I didn't pray to them or something. Anyway. Really 90 to 95% of what you do in DBT is done in SQL. The difference is that you, in DBT, you create SQL queries that then become either views or tables in Snowflake. Actually, there's four things that you can materialize in DBT, but just gonna see, I'm gonna share something else really quick. Let's see here, how do I, oh, there it is. One thing that I started doing more in DBT, and I can share that in a lucid chart. Oh, that is cool. I didn't know that about Python. Thanks, Russ. One thing I started doing more, and that is planning out my DAG. Now, DBT calls it a DAG, which is basically a directed acrylic graph or a collection of all the tasks that you want to run and organize in a way that reflects your relationships and dependencies. So I think they may have borrowed the term DAG from Airflow. But this is what you're seeing right now is a pre-plan to create my dimension and fact tables. And by doing this, first, I'm able to build out my DBT models. But imagine for a moment that each one of these, from blue over to my date dim, customer dim, commissions fact, orders fact, are all SQL files in DBT. And so there's a staging. There's a place where I have SQL, and then there's some intermediate, and sometimes I do a little bit of transforming here. Most of my transformations will occur between here and creating my dim and fact tables and my intermediate tables. And inside the well, let me just say this: by pre-planning what my DAGs will be when I begin to model, I succeed in avoiding a spaghetti-like looking data lineage. Let me change this to. So what I want to avoid is something that looks like this. Oh, let me share one more thing. I think this will also help kind of explain the value of DBT just a little bit more. This this is, I'm just trying to look for, well, this is kind of what can happen in even in a modern data stack, is that we start going back to old ways. And I'm not saying that's wrong to write stored procedures for your transforming of data. But here's your source data, right? And your source data can turn out to be CSV files and or Parquet files or Avron files, whatever the case. In Snowflake and likely BigQuery, I'm looking forward to. You can extract from any one of these types of data and then transform that data. And you can do that in stored procedures. But let me just show you what happens, tends to happen, is this, where you're starting to self-reference tables or views, and it becomes a little bit like spaghetti. Not only that, but your SQL is stored inside. You know, for Snowflake, you have to show everything, and maybe you are using a version control tool, and that helps a lot. But it starts becoming a little bit crazy. And then this is DBT, and I'm going to say this is DBT. Also, when you plan ahead a little bit, and when you say, "Hey, look, this is going to be our presentation layer or our dining room table," if you're a Kimball fan, but a little bit of planning, but DBT, and you'll find this out when I do the demo. So do send me an email because I will present on how to accomplish this type of organization.
Hey Norman, does DBT have the equivalent, any type of optimizer that's built in? Is that one of the reasons it builds the DAG?
Does it have an optimizer? No, because the DAG, I'm gonna say no, because the DAG will be as organized as your models. Oh, but what it does do, and I have another slide on this, is that it allows you to use this thing called ref, and then it puts in order. So oftentimes you have to make sure you have your pipelines in order, so this table is populated before you refresh this table and this table. DBT will actually keep things in order, where as long as you're using this Jinja thing right here, ref, and then stage orders, it will actually make sure that everything runs in order. And they're showing the DAG as a result of this right here. This is like a mini DAG. That's a good question.
And I think that gets back to like under stored procedures, you lose that capability because there's a black box of sorts wrapped around there, just like we see in our other database technologies. There's only so many optimizations you can make when you have a wrapper around things, where lots of things in that wrapper could be happening.
Yeah, a lot of things in this wrapper, but not only that, yeah. And then you have, but then you, like in Snowflake, you have to make sure all of your events are being run in a particular order. And there's not a great, as far as I know, maybe there are some tools now out there, but there's not a great tool to manage that order. This way, it starts with the developer and can end with the developer or the analyst, and how well it's organized. Another something to keep in mind, and that is that your cost and your complexity for DBT, I would say really cost in time. There's a bit of upfront time in learning DBT. It took me a good week to fully, well, not even to fully, but to kind of catch the spirit and create my first dimension in DBT. Over time, I'm very confident about this, that DBT will, and I'm not a salesperson for DBT. I really am product agnostic. I really don't care, but my bias is towards speed and simplicity. And over time, DBT will cost less and be less complex. And this is true too. You actually do start enjoying your transformation work. I hate sitting in a UI and learning, you know, getting carpal tunnel and yeah. Man, I can't tell you how goofy I feel. I didn't get my dev environment set up today. I do have, and these are this took me a good month and a half, but it's a foolproof method for installing DBT minus the SQL Server. I gave this presentation at the SQL Server group because you can connect to SQL Server. This could be Snowflake. In fact, I think it might be. But these right here are the instructions on how to install DBT safely in a Windows environment. So you install Python, but then you install DBT. Oh, there it is right there. Look at that, DBT Snowflake within that environment variable. The one thing I don't have here is when you do install DBT inside it in a virtual environment, sorry, I don't know what I said, environment variable. When you install DBT in a virtual environment, there are some snafus in Windows where you want to do this. And where is I going with that? Oh, you want to, if you're familiar with GitHub, you want to have a .git ignore file and ignore you know, everything in dbt-env or whatever you call your virtual environment. But I guarantee these instructions right here will save you a bit of headache that I had to go through. Just lastly, these links are great. This right here is a fantastic video on just a little bit of work to get a lot of mileage with, you know, some of your first DBT projects and staying orderly. And then there's a guy on YouTube that helps you create your first DBT project. And once you do that, you're set. The other thing is DBT does have a cloud UI, and I am not super familiar with it. But it happens to look just like when you're developing, they've made it look very similar to your experience in VS Code. For me, it's not the same. Not the same experience. And Russ, you've been with Trainywell long enough, and you've seen both. What would you say about the difference between working in VS Code versus DBT's paid online version, which I think is only $50, per seat per month per developer.
Yeah, it does the job. Yeah, my personal workflow will probably just be local with VS Code, but yeah, our analysts will definitely be using that. They don't have any like VS Code skill or command line literacy, I guess. So yeah, they'll be. So, but yeah, it was great. I used it for my first change or two to the code base and made a branch and submitted a pull request, and yeah, it did everything fine. Yeah, it was good. I liked it.
Nice. How many people will take me up on having a quick DBT tour next week? Yay. Good, because I want to make up for for not getting my environment set up. They threw so much stuff at me at this company. It was good, but it was a little much. All the content. They're a content creation company, so there was a lot of content. But I do love the company. We're not hiring currently. That's how good they are. But I think they will be in a little while. If anyone's up for you know, a pretty small startup, but a lot of really great engineers. Any questions?
I have a few questions.
Okay.
If time permits. So I can see how DBT is an excellent tool for organizing your SQL models, right? So at design stage or testing stage, it's great. But what kind of controls does it give you for executing those transformations in production, for example? When you have all these models ready, you want to push it to, say, to an ETL pipeline and say, hey, I want 10 worker nodes to execute those transformations because my data is partitioned. So the question is, does DBT provide maybe Snowflake or tool-specific configurations that allow you to control those scalings?
They do, in fact. So when you configure your first DBT model and you actually configure a YAML file that connects to Snowflake, you can tell it exactly how many. I usually use 10, so that my DBT model runs faster. But yeah, there's some good configuration for you know, having the resources that you need. But on that note, one thing that I did do while I was at ASEA is I broke down this 1,800 line SQL code into about 15 models, and each model or SQL file really equated to one single metric. And I was able to reference, you know, create my tables that are views, or even my, they call it an ephemeral. Tell me if I'm pronouncing that right, ephemeral.
Yeah,
Ephemeral, thanks. Materialization that DBT allows you to create is similar to a common table expression. But what I'm saying is that if you have SQL, you know this, if you have SQL that's so big, if you break it down and make it, you know, make it so that each one of those, you can have pieces of SQL from that. I turned that 1,800 thing into about 15 to 20 models, and each model represented a metric. And it also made it so that other people could work on metrics. You know, they could branch the code and work on different metrics that were a result of the SQL. And oftentimes that is the solution to you know, not having SQL run for too long, even against Snowflake. But did that answer your question about the configuration?
Yeah, yes, thank you. And so I also noticed that Russ described it as an object modeling for your SQL queries, which is, I think, excellent description. And I understand that Dbt is trying to solve this lack of object orientation in SQL, right? Native object orientation problem, and which is like in big data pipelines, we use a lot of like Spark code, which basically has all this object-oriented nature and SQL embedded in it and all that good stuff. Do you think that it makes sense to use Dbt together with technologies such as Spark?
Yeah, I mean, Dbt has made a case to do that because they've partnered with Databricks. And so they've made a case. It's still, I'm gonna say it's still new. I won't say it's bleeding edge, but because I haven't used it. But definitely because there's that partnership, I have a pretty good feeling that they want to be able to handle bigger data than what just SQL can handle. And there are use cases for that. When I worked at ASEA, I could only invent one use case to use Databricks because they were using Databricks, but I'm the kind of person that I don't want to use. I just want I want the right tool to fit the use case. And that was with our comparison tool written in Python. We needed that written in Spark. Because you're comparing, two really big tables and you want a full complete result set from that to show the difference.
Makes sense. Thanks. So you think they're complementary technologies?
They are, and they are when you use Databricks.
Okay.
And I don't know if they will partner with other companies that support Spark. I imagine that they will, or they might.
Thank you.
And the other disclaimer is I haven't used it, so I don't know how well it integrates with Databricks.
Hey, question about what you see as best practices or common practices. I'm just barely getting into Dbt, but looking through some code that's already been written, it seems like common table expressions are really popular in it, and sometimes tons and tons of them. Have you noticed that as well? And is that a pattern or an anti-pattern, or just kind of another tool in the tool belt?
For me, it's another tool in the tool belt, but Dbt does address it in an article called "How We Organize Our Projects." I think they cover it there. If they don't there, oh, here it is. Let me just share this really quick. And reading through this kind of helps you. Let me get to the comment thing. Oh, here it is. But if you look at this, how we structure our Dbt projects, it's a great article, actually. I'm going to see if they discuss CTAs. What was rationale for using CTAs and building the staging model, blah, 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 blah. It's a matter, they say it's totally a matter of preference. I thought it was overkill when I started at Fishtown, but now I like it. We've also done some quick investigation, found that on modern data warehouses, it doesn't impact the performance of your queries. More on that over here, CTEs and pass-throughs. So here's some research on that question about CTEs.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. They have, I love their documentation because it's kind of, they're very transparent. Like when they talk about Dbt transfer, no, materializations. I just appreciate that they give you the pros and cons for each materialization. It's, you know, I don't look at documentation a lot, but when I do, I want to see the pros and cons and some advice. And they just have just enough documentation. It's not overkill. And a little copy feature, of course. Yeah. Did that answer your question or over answer? Cool. I didn't get a chance to read everything in the comments.
It was just a bunch of
So,
chatting, really.
okay. Cool. Yeah, anything else?
Questions? Any final questions from anybody? All right, I guess not. Thank you very much, Norm. We really appreciate it and love the presentation. We definitely will talk about a part 2. Like I said, I don't know the exact schedule right now, but we're working on it. And of course, as always, we are always looking for speakers and presenters to this group. You guys have no idea how many speakers I try to fill per month across the different groups I run. So trust me, if you ever want to present, I've got a spot for you somewhere. So, so if you're ever interested, but thank you again, Norm. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and then we'll close this down. And I appreciate everybody for coming. Oh, that's right. I'm going to stop the recording anyways, but